for Sweethearts, like the second season, I found the Normal People original soundtrack really, really helpful. And it was so beautiful too. I used that music as stem all of season two.
So America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders was edited to the Normal People soundtrack. This is incredible. I'm
The
like a
stuff I
normal
touch for sure. Yeah.
I'm like a normal people freak. Like, so this is happy news to me. Hello, welcome to the Unscripted Files. My name is Madeline Cunningham. I am a development producer in the unscripted industry, bringing you candid conversations with the minds behind your favorite form of entertainment. Today's a first for the series. I have an editor on who has edited some of your favorite shows, specifically on Netflix. Cheer, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, America's Sweethearts. She sits down with me to talk about her process, how she got into the industry, what her work ethic is, and ultimately how, Cheer was really redefining in terms of what a fresh take it was on reality. It was really a big reset for the industry and continues to be a reference for content made today. My goal of this show has always been to spotlight the creatives that shape the content that we love that never get the credit they deserve. And editors are a huge part of that equation. So really excited for you guys to listen. Here is my chat with Stefanie Maridueña. Stefanie, welcome to the Unscripted Files. How you doing?
I am doing good. I just wrapped a project on Tuesday, so I am excited right now to just have some time off and traveling next week and doing some errands at home. So I'm like in a super high place right now.
Oh, very good. I'm glad that we got to connect during this like little bit of downtime when you've just wrapped. How do you celebrate finishing and delivering a project?
So I've started doing this thing recently where I'll take a photo with like my timeline and my two screens, and just like on my last day I'll take a photo, and usually like with my husband will take the photo, and technically we like to go to like dinner and have a drink, but because I'm gonna be going abroad next week, like I'm just gonna postpone. I'm seeing my best friend this weekend too, so I'm just like, we're gonna do a lot of like celebrating this weekend and next week. So I didn't do it this time around, but
I
yeah.
love that. I love the picture with the timeline. That's so real. I hope like a carpal tunnel massage, right? Like I feel like you need like a full like shoulders,
Yes,
hands. Like I know you're in that edit bay just working. And I was just saying how excited I am to have you on. You're the first editor that I've gotten to chat with in the
that's so
unscripted
exciting.
industry. And I know how critical you are to shaping tone, to shaping story. And I'm so excited to dive in it with you because you're responsible for some of our favorite shows. Cheer,
Thank
Last
you.
Chance U Basketball, America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders, The Circus, the greatest political show on earth. Just really, and shows specifically that like kind of changed the game. I remember when Cheer came on, the tone of it was different and fresh, the editing style. And it became a point of reference. You know, I'm in development, and it became a point of reference for a lot of people to be like, oh, it's Cheer, but for this. And
Yes.
and it really was kind of a cultural reset in the industry. So talk to me about your journey. Editors typically start off as assistants. Was your path that traditional, or was a bit more unconventional?
Definitely unconventional. I think a good place to start is like, I wasn't even planning to be in the field in the first place. And you hear that a lot actually with a lot of people that I've talked to. There's so many different coworkers that I've had, or just in networking events, people that I'll talk to that will have very similar like experiences where they went to college for something and somehow they just like stumbled upon the film industry, and then that's where they ended up staying. In my case, I went to school for ecology, so I was always really into
Fellow science
science.
girly, biology.
There you go. See, you get it. This
Yeah.
is like ecology, biology. Like I loved science. It's funny
Hmm.
too, because like at the end of college, on like my senior year, I think it was like the end of my junior and like start of my senior year, I took physics because I had been delaying it for the longest. Because I was like, I feel like I'm gonna hate it, so I'm just gonna wait to do it till the end, and I ended up loving it. So it's so funny because sometimes I'm like, shit, should I like would have loved to do, to do something like that instead. Um, I think like one thing is that I always felt like I was a storyteller. So since I was really young, when I was a child, I used to make up stories to like my friends. I would have like scary story time with my friends and literally just make up anything on the spot. And then I would have like little plays that I would have for my grandfather. And even with my sister at night, we would always just like tell each other stories and make things up. So it always felt like part of me to be a storyteller. So when I graduated from school, and I was kind of trying to figure out like where do I want to specialize in ecology? Like I knew that I would have to like continue further education. And while I figured, but I wasn't really quite ready to commit because my interest was so broad within that field. Oh, in the meantime, my sister, who's also an editor, she was working on the show, The First 48, and
Okay.
she was like, listen, I can try to see if I can get you an interview to start as like a transcriber on the show. So at least you'll have like, a job in the meantime while you figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up going on the job and I got the job and I was a transcriber and I kind of like started learning a little bit more about, the process of filmmaking through being a transcriber and like seeing everything that was going on around me. But then literally like I still thought I was going to pursue ecology. I ended up quitting my job because I had like a month-long vacation with family. And so I told him like, listen, I'm going on vacation, quit my job, was ready to go on this like, look at jobs, additional things that I could like consider outside of New York City for ecology. And then I ended up, when I came back from my trip, one of my producers, her name was Bianca, she was like, listen, I can give you back your job if you still want it. Yeah. So she ended up, and I kind of took that as a sign, like, maybe, I still don't have it figured out what I'm going to do in ecology. Like I was trying to be like impulsive and just like see where it would land. But I kind of took it as a sign like, listen, like she really likes me and maybe I am supposed to be here. Like, and I did feel like I was starting to connect more with like the documentary world.
Mm-hmm.
So once I stayed, I started to like start to watch more documentaries and even just like start to think about stories differently. Like whenever I watch something, right? Like think about like, oh, how are they doing things? And through that process, I eventually just ended up staying in the field. So yeah, very,
So
very different.
it is, but very typical in this industry because there really is no pipeline. Like there's no formal training really. It
Yes.
really is all about just getting in there. Okay, but you started transcribing. What is your first, like, how did you see your sister's an editor, so you had a
Mhm.
bit of exposure to the career, but when did you first go, "Ooh, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to try it."
So I watched a TED talk that was talking about shooting a 1 second video a day. And then at the end of the day, you can put it into like a string out and, like string it out and you have like your full year. And I started just experimenting with that. Like I literally just started like documenting my own life through like these 1 seconds that I would take. And I did that for 5 years. I stopped, I think, around COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, it was like around COVID because I was just like
Yeah.
getting depressing, just like
They
turning
started
out
looking
like
the same.
it's
Yeah.
just all the same. I was just like, I don't know if I want to like look back at this,
Mm-hmm.
in the future. Through that process, even like stringing it out into like the full year, I like went on like iMovie. I didn't even know, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I put in I loaded the files into iMovie and then I was just like, I guess I just like dropped things in here and like figuring out like, okay, making sure, because I didn't always just take 1 second. I would take like longer videos
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, right? And so I'd be like, I start selecting like, oh, what is like, if it have like a 3 minute video of something, I'd be like, oh, maybe let me find like the best chunk here that I like that I want to highlight for that day.
Mm-hmm.
So that also like started like like I started really like thinking like an editor through that. And I didn't even really think about it so much in that time. Once I realized, like, wait, I'm doing like the same thing as kind of like essentially what theaters around me are doing. I was like, oh, okay, this is like something and I really was finding joy in selecting the best shots and, thinking about just like, I mean, this was like a very primitive way of thinking about editing, right? Because it's not just like what you see
Mm-hmm.
and what you
Sure.
hear, but that was my first what's it called? Like my first instinct to editing that I had. And so, yeah, just from like putting together these videos, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna try like start to ask for more challenges at work. I was transcriber, I think, for like a year and a half. I definitely could have moved up like sooner had I like really wanted to.
Hmm.
But at the time I still was so unsure. So, but once I decided, then I became an edit room assistant. And I think the main thing that we were doing was like I think at the time we were still digitizing tapes and syncing interviews. And then from there, I ended up becoming an assistant editor on that show. So this was all at First 48. And so I became an assistant editor. And I think once I was an assistant editor, that's when I really got to get even more like of a deep dive as like what an editor's experience is like. So what was great with that show, and I feel like you don't really get that much, at least from my experience as an editor now, I feel like you don't get this to give the assistant editors this kind of experience anymore. Where it was very like I was the only assistant for only one editor for like my assigned episode. And it was a night position. So he would, work during the day. And then at the end of the day, he would leave me like a list of tasks of things to
Mm.
do. And it would be anywhere from like look for these types of shots, find music, organize certain things. So and then eventually he started like giving me also just like little things like, do you want to do a pass on this scene?
Mm.
And another thing that I really liked that First 48 that I don't know if they still do this, but they also gave all their assistant editors a short form assignment. So that they would put on the website, I believe. So then I would get my assignment and I would get to edit my little assignment that way. And I think that was like just from the get-go, that's when I was like, okay, now I know for a fact I really want to edit. Like I was having a lot of fun deciding, how to build something. I love building things in general. Like I'm very hands-on. Since I was little, like I always like to, for example, for this past Halloween, I made a costume, a Dallas Cowboy Cheerleader costume for my dog, like from scratch.
I love
So
that.
I think it's also just like, you're doing the same in the edit, right? You're like
Hmm.
creating something and that you can then show someone and be like, look what I created.
Yes, a tangible result. It's so satisfying and so validating.
Exactly. Yeah. So once I had enough time at the first 48, honestly, like the night shift was insane. I did it, I think, for a year. And it
Mm.
really messed up with like my life,
Mm. It'll get you. That night
yeah,
shift will get you.
it really does. So I knew that I'd have to like go to like a daytime position. So soon after I went to a daytime show, actually Bianca, the same producer that had me stay at First 48, then hired me for a daytime position when she left to another company as an assistant editor. And then there I was like always very adamant of like really doing a good job at like my actual assistant editor duties. But also I would always go out of my way to talk to my editors and be like, hey, if there's anything that I could do a pass on, or if you need help with anything, definitely reach out. I would work extra hours because I knew like if I have to do this, my main job was being an assistant editor. So I had to make sure that all of that was done. So a lot of the time it meant also then going, working extra hours to do the things that I'm requesting to do for my own personal growth, right? But it's not necessarily like for the role. It was like a hustle. And I started to just like look for any way that I could edit anything and like get my hands on something, like find on Facebook groups like people requesting, oh, I need someone to edit like the short documentary for me.
Mm.
Or there was like Adobe had a contest for like a music video edit for like an Imagine Dragons song. And they give you like all the raw footage that they actually, I think it was the same raw footage that they had for the actual music video. So that was
Oh,
really fun too.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so just
So
like portfolio building, like skill building projects
yes,
as you work your way up.
exactly.
And then
Exactly.
your first official editor credit was on an insane show,
Hmm.
the Circus, the Greatest Political Show on Earth, which is like a not real time, but like near real time. You're filming Tuesday to Sunday, and then you're airing on Sunday the same week. Talk to me about that experience specifically, getting your first official credit with something that was so high pressure and intense.
I started out at Circus as a promotional editor. When I was an assistant editor and I knew that I wanted to move out to editing, that transition is so difficult to go from assistant editor to editor that um, I ended up having to, leave that assistant editor position that was like so cushy and take a risk. Through that risk, I left my permalance job for this 2-week, I think 3-week gig in Florida where we were editing in person. And one of the editors there, Evan Weiss, he was an editor from the circus. So because I worked closely with him, he recommended me for the circus as promotional editor. So I started out as that. And so I started kind of like editing a little bit. Like the promo editor, you usually were editing like scenes that they wanted to use for promoting the show, either like if a host was going on like the Tonight Show or something like that.
Okay, sure.
Or on the website or Instagram. That's kind of how I started, shaping, like editing some of like those types of scenes. And then once I became promoted to edit on the actual show, it was just like being thrown into this chaos, right? Like at least I was able to ease into it because in the promo editor position was also kind of chaotic, but it was very intense. Definitely, like, it's funny, for my first editor credit, I felt like I was dealing with a lot of like imposter syndrome and like, what am I doing here? I was surrounded by some really magnificent editors. And like, I knew that they were really good. I could see what they were putting together. And then I'm like, how are they doing this? But because of that, I was able to learn a lot with like from everybody, like seeing what everyone around me was doing. So a lot of times I would do like a first pass on a scene and then I would pass it on to someone else. And then when I would see how this scene would change when it aired. And I would learn just from that. It's funny too, because it was such a like quick, high paced environment. I didn't have any time to like dwell in the anxiety of you kind of just like put on this
there's no room
like,
for it. Yeah,
there really isn't. So I you kind of just like get going. The way that we approached it was essentially, I think sometimes they started shooting like Sunday, Monday, and then we would start the edit on Tuesdays, right? So they would kind of have an idea of what was happening that week just from, current events. You kind of like know, like, okay, like the UN is meeting next week, things like that. And they would kind of shape it around that. And also just what just happened the week prior, like what parts of
the fallout
exactly are we gonna like continue to follow through on. And then, but honestly, like random things happened all the time. There was like one episode where I think it was when Trump bombed Syria. It was like the mother of all bombs. I don't know if you remember that. And it was like on a Friday night, and it just totally like shifted like a lot of what we had edited through the week. We edited Saturday was like picture lock day. So
of course
you're like, yeah, exactly. But I think that job was great in like teaching me flexibility and not being married to like, okay, this is how the scene is and this is how it stays. We originally like built out a scene that like was cohesive with the themes of that week. But as the week developed, either we had to cut a scene because it was no longer relevant, or we would have to tweak it and see what other parts of the scene that we didn't use or like when we first did our pass of it now are more relevant in the story based on like how the rest of the week developed. So unfolded. Yeah.
With the example you gave of Trump bombing Syria, in that case, do you guys just make exceptions for that? And you're like, we're going in early, we're going in late, we're pushing picture lock. We've got to obviously talk about this. And you're like really scrambling to sort of make it happen.
Honestly, I think like thankfully a lot of the times when something crazy like that happened, we were also like, current events show. So and following Trump, a lot of it was already like very random, very sporadic. So just like we would have like a moment of like breaking news and like announce what happened.
Okay.
But then, yeah, exactly.
So you've created sort of a flexible format where for things that did come in real close to picture lock, you could sort of add to that little breaking news segment that were maybe, not a little more maybe lo-fi or even just not as like polished just because it was.
Right.
Okay, got
towards the end. And then also, honestly, like, we were all, the hours that we worked on that show were already insane. So in terms of like, you guys need to come in early tomorrow, it was like we were already like doing that. It's just like it was what was required of that show. Which I will say that's like really important. It's like we were very well compensated for like after we like build our like initial like 50 hours, which really helped because I don't want to like people to think like this is how you make shows like this. Like
no,
shows like that worked because you're like properly taking care of your crew and your team.
a great point.
So yeah, that was something that like definitely, and like a lot of us were very invested in the subject matter and like, following policies. I mean, like back then, especially like everyone was like listening to like the Daily from New York Times every morning and, really following like what's happening with our lives because it was so new to have this kind of like political landscape that was so much more like explosive and random and chaotic.
Yes. So
So
polarizing.
yes, and polarizing,
Yeah.
exactly. But whereas
Like
now I feel like we're so used to it.
we've gotten so desensitized, but the fact that it just, I don't know, these things that you report on or these wild things that are being said or done used to be so few and far between. You couldn't build a weekly show on them. And the past few
Yes.
years, you probably couldn't even fit it all in,
Yes.
which is wild. So speaking of fitting it all in, like how did you decide what was important to include and not? I mean, obviously there's sort of your bigger moments, but when you are personally sort of with an editorial eye looking at it, how do you
Sure.
decide what to keep and what to put away, especially under such a tight timeline?
Yeah. With a show like that, something that was really important as well was just like we had a very strong team. So we'd have a lot of conversations and meetings with our executive producer, Ted Bourne, for example, who was like overseeing the full episode. And he would check in and like let us know if any developments happened either on the field or when they were editing a different scene and seeing that they were leaning into something else that maybe I wasn't aware of. Then
Mm-hmm.
he would come in and communicate that with us. And we also, had like a Google chat group that we would all like talk in. And so it was all like very like communication was integral in creating a show like that. So that I would always be aware of like, okay, what are the main points that we're following through? So to make a show like that, you need to be very focused. It's not so much like other documentaries where you're kind of exploring where you're going and like see where like things land, right? You kind of already have to have a plan set. And the team that I was working with was really good at having like giving me direction on like what they wanted and how they wanted the scene to unfold. And usually like I would watch, they would give me like some string outs that I could also go off of when I would start editing a scene. And based on that, I would also like then go to the raw and see like if there was anything missing from there, go to the raw and see like, okay, how can I make this more cohesive? But at the same time, um, the string, as I'd say, would be like a 10-minute string out for something that you want to be like a 2-minute scene. So you just kind of have to be decisive. And it's just like being informed on like what is happening and having these conversations with my producers about what is the story that we're following help me decide, okay, like we should focus on this aspect of the scene rather than, something else.
Yeah. Do you find that because in your day-to-day life as an editor, you're constantly sort of thinking, okay, what is efficient? What is optimal? Do you find that you're impatient when you watch other content sometimes? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
where you're like, get
Why
to
would
the,
it?
like, sort of, yeah, why was this included? Get to the point. Like, do you feel like the career path has sort of like made you lean that way a little bit?
Honestly, a little bit.
Okay.
I will say I don't watch a lot of documentaries, so
You
I'm gonna
can't.
have to. Yeah, I because it feels too much like work. I start analyzing everything
Mm-hmm.
that they're doing, and I can't just like sit and like focus. Right? I made an effort. Like, it's better if I go to like the theater to watch a
Sure. Of
documentary because then it just really like it becomes more immersive. I definitely
course.
find myself like getting distracted by like decisions that were made. Why are they using this music?
Yeah. You mentioned music, and I'm glad that you did because I do want to talk really quickly before we dive into your work on Netflix about music. How does that play into your process? It is so integral to the edit.
Yes, totally.
So talk to me about how do you get the liberty of suggesting music? Do you not? And it's sort of, given to you and you have to edit to it. Talk to me about how that plays into your process.
Yeah. So every show is different, right? Some shows, for example, with Circus, we had a composer that had, and Circus was on for many years, so we almost had like a whole library of music that he had composed for the show. So we mainly relied a lot on that, and then he would compose some new things for us. But then more like, for example, my Netflix work or like some of my other shows that I worked on, my approach to music is always like at the beginning. I kind of like to think about, and also just like things that I've gathered from having conversations with the director or like the story team. I kind of try to gauge an idea, like, okay, like what is the vibe that we're going for, and what's the tones that are we gonna like be exploring, and focus on that. And then I start to literally just like think about like what are things that I've watched recently that I feel could fit this. So I'll start Googling a lot of different shows and like going on like their like pull up from their original soundtracks. Um, so like for Sweethearts, like the second season, I found the Normal People original soundtrack really, really helpful. And it was so beautiful too.
Have you seen
So
the series?
yes. It's so funny because I hadn't watched it at first, and I had pulled all this music from them, and I used that music as stem all of season 2. And then I finally watched the show after I wrapped season 2, and I was like, oh my God, this is so intense, because I like was so used to like I had like a connection to those songs already, to like
Right.
those tracks. And then watching it, how it was originally used, this is like a whole new experience for me. You know, like
Okay,
I've
so
never usually watched like have that happen.
I love that. So, okay, so America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders was edited to the Normal People soundtrack. This is incredible. I'm
The
like a
stuff I
normal
touch for sure. Yeah.
I'm like a Normal People freak. Like, so this is happy news to me. Okay, interesting. So you do edit to a vibe, and then obviously once the actual music is composed or dropped in, then you'll sharpen it up. Okay, that makes a lot of
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah. But I
Okay,
love that
cool.
process of music. I love music. And so it's like definitely one of the things that I have the most fun with, because it's like you really get to navigate how you want to use it, and just like looking at the intricacies. So then when it goes to like the composer, I always hope that they pick up on the same things like that I picked up on for when I used like, or how I edited a cue, so that hopefully they know like this is when we're kind of building, and this is
Right.
why I get very attached to the
No,
music for
absolutely. Of
sure.
course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you do. Yeah, and working hand in hand with that team, I think is so critical. I love that little
Hmm.
nugget of information. Okay, let's dive into cheer.
Yes.
You seem to have like a really good partnership with Greg Whiteley, his production company One Potato. They've done Cheer, Last Chance U, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders, America's Sweethearts, all kind of with this a very similar tone, obviously in the
Hmm.
sports industry, following these very specific sort of niche stories that are very character driven. Talk to me about how that partnership started and what it was like to be brought on for season 2 of Cheer.
Yeah. So it's funny. Like everyone else, I watched season 1 and I was blown away. I loved how it was such an unexpected approach. Like I feel like what people really connected to was like how surprised they were at like how interested and like how invested they would get in the
Yes.
story of Cheer. So
Right. Not
I remember,
celebrities, not like just a very normal story with like high stakes for those particular characters. And it was incredibly compelling.
exactly. And also just like I think the way that Greg and his team are able to really just like capture like what embodies a person, and like their motivations and what drives them and what their weaknesses are. It's just like a very human and intimate approach that they have, that I don't think you see a lot. And there's like a whole way that they do this that I don't think that a lot of people understand. Like you have to be very patient with other, like you were saying, a lot of sports series are like, this is going to be like blah, 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 like Cheer, but for blah, 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 right? But you can't just like imitate this process. It's like something that I think is very innate to like Greg's ability to interview his subjects, and then also the rest of the team that has kind of come up under him and
Mm.
learned from him. So I was very excited when that finished. I remember thinking like, oh my God, I would love to edit for a show like that. Like I thought it was like such a beautiful show that was so captivating. And that's kind of like the stuff like I knew that I wanted, the kind of work that I wanted to do, like something that was like very like revealing of like what a human experience is like, right? And so they literally just like randomly emailed me one day, and they were like, Cheer is looking for an editor for season 2. And I literally was like, is this happening? Like,
Wha-
did I really just get this email? I was like, okay. I mean, obviously I was like, yes, I'm available, and I remember I interviewed. I was like, I think that went okay, but I honestly didn't think I was gonna get it.
Mm.
At this point, I think I had only had like 3 editor credits under my belt or something like that. So in my head, I was just like, I don't know if I'm like good enough. I was still kind of dealing with some of the like imposter syndrome. And then they called me and they were like, "Hey, we really liked you in like the interview. We would love to work with you." And
Amazing.
that's how that panned out. So when I was in season two, I did Cheer season two, and then they reached out again for Last Chance U basketball, the second season of that. Then again for like the first season of American Sweetheart. And then at this point, it's kind of like I've been so blessed that I've been able to build this relationship with them where I'm like one of their go-to people. When it comes to editing, it's literally like such a blessing. And I feel so fortunate because they're such an amazing team to work with. So
I love that.
I feel like I'm so
You
lucky.
really manifested that. I thought you were going to say, I watched it. I emailed their team. I reached out 10 times. No, they
No.
came to you. I'm obsessed with that. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It really was like I even just to think about like how and that's like honestly like a lot of things like with my life that I think about. I feel like so much of it was so fateful. Like even me like getting hired back on like that first 48 job when when they let me I said I quit, but they actually let me go because I was going to be gone for so long. And so, like, I just kind of took these as signs, right?
Mm,
So it just reinforced that I am where I'm supposed to be. And it always like, then like as my career continued, I was like thinking like, I really, and like things like having like the people from Cheer reach out to me and then hiring me. I'm like, wow, this really is like what's supposed to happen, like what's meant to
absolutely.
happen. It's just crazy, you
No, I
know?
love that so much. I love that. What was different, like coming on to Cheer? It's in its second season. The first season was obviously so popular, pivotal. So, what was it like sort of coming on to the second season where we already know most of the characters, the style's really been established, but how did you really try to continue to elevate the show in its second season?
So one thing that was great with the second season is that, I think that the team knew that it couldn't just be like another like following Navarro through their season, right? Because it was going to be some things had changed. Right now these characters had newfound fame, for example, and you do see kind of like how that starts affecting somebody and like changing some, and they were also young, so you also kind of start to see how just like as young as they continue to develop as young adults, you are always kind of changing, right? And like evolving and like up until like your 30s or something. I don't know. But so that kind of already like gave us something that was like a little bit different than like what was in season one. The fact that they were changed people just because they had all this popularity around them and like so many more, like so much more of a spotlight and eyes on the program. But then what they also did was they decided to follow the other team, the TVCC. I can't I forget what it stood for, but so that gave us an opportunity to then dive into new characters and build a new foundation of people like to like for the audience to be invested in. And that was also really fun because now we could also kind of like look at the new conflict would be just like you're invested in both of them, right?
Right.
You're invested
Yeah.
in TDCC and Navarro, and you understand now how the stories and the of all the people involved on both sides. So it's like, how do you choose who you like when they're all very compelling characters? So it was really fun, I think, to
Oh, that
like
is fun.
navigate. So it was just really fun, like getting to explore like PBCC side as like the underdog. You know
Hmm.
that they kind of have this like grungy, like kind of like what the hell now Navarro is, the popular ones. Everyone's gonna be
Hmm.
rooting for them, and they're that's just it's just always kind of fun to like navigate these conflicts within like different teams and different characters like that.
Well, and I like how that challenges the audience as well, because you're right, we do get so attached and we feel like our characters are typically the heroes, like they're the protagonists. And when you bring in sort of the traditional opposition in that way, but you humanize them, it does create a conflict as a viewer of being like, oh, that's right. That's right. Everyone's got their own story. Everyone's got their own thing going on. And it reminds you, I don't know, there's just this interesting reminder that everyone's got their own journey
Yeah,
and it's easy to, like, side with the people that you get to know, but, like,
exactly.
the other team is not just the other team, it's a whole new set of humans and emotions and stories, and I do love that that is what season 2 brought into it, was like, "Yeah, we know that you fell in love with these people, and the other team is, like, the enemy, but, like, let's bring in this new dynamic." That's so interesting. As an editor, how do you strike the balance between like the sports action piece, like the high athlete, and these, really human character arcs? How do you approach them
Hmm.
differently?
For me, and I think this is like with my experience on like all the one potato production shows that
Hmm.
there's all the sports series that I've done. the sports aspect of it is really more of like canvas of sorts, or almost like a timeline that like helps us like propel the story in terms of like what we're like aiming for, what are the goals, like like help us understand what the characters are like ultimate goals are. But there's not what really is, I think, important in these stories is navigating and exploring the human aspect. So the sports kind of just is in, you kind of use it as like the connection, right? To like all your characters is like the thing that while we're there, why we're there. But to me, I don't really think of it as like the main event. It's not really like a struggle when like when do we go to the sports and when do we go to like the personal characters. I feel like the personal characters are the ones that like drive the story forward. They're the reason why the audience gets invested. Because you could watch a sport, you know, you can always just tune in TV, your television, or like go online and like watch a sport, right? So there's inherent energy that like, you know, it's gonna make you like excited or like want to root for someone. That when you become so personally invested and like understanding who the people are behind these teams, I think that's what really like helps propel the story
Mm.
and really makes the audience want to like navigate through that journey with them.
Yeah. So the sports is the backdrop, and
Yeah, it is the
ultimately
backdrop.
the
Yeah.
upcoming competition or trying to make the squad. These are all goals that these characters have, and they give us this sort of countdown and
It's
this
almost like
sort
an
of
outline
time,
of sorts.
yeah, this
Yeah.
time bound thing to sort of anchor us. But ultimately,
Hmm.
it's the backdrop for these character journeys, and that's how you guys really approach it, and that's why it's so
Yeah.
successful.
And kind of understanding to like the dynamics within the team, and using the games as an opportunity to further understand your characters and what you've learned about them, right? So you remember that, like, say, for example, for I'm gonna throw an example for like America's Sweetheart, there was one, and that one's a little bit trickier because they don't really, they're performers, so they're not necessarily like playing in the sport in that way that like they're like competing against another team or something like that. But and training camp kind of becomes like that first thing that grounds us. But in season two, we have, you know, a story about Ariel that's like telling us how she like really struggles with her flexibility, and that it's something that she's been working on for so long. So then that helps us to know when we go to training camp, like to look at the training camp footage and see her performing, where do we see that reflected in her performance, right? So we see her when she's warming up, struggling to put her leg up when everyone is
Uh-huh.
just like flat and she's like
Uh-huh.
fighting with her foot, right? Or like when they're doing the kicks and the kicks practice, and she just like you learn to like, let's see what happened with Ariel
Right.
during this practice and see like, and then we see exactly what she told us. You know, she's still not flexible, as flexible as she wants to be, and you can see them correcting her on her flexibility. So that kind of helps us like shape what we put based on like the performance, right? Like what we've learned from the interview or the OTF of the character helps us like kind of like know like where to focus, what to focus
Right.
on in the performance or in the game. Same with like Last Chance U basketball and cheer. Now that we knew like what were the things that they were getting in their heads, like for Jada, she had that mental block with her tumbling. And we could see that reflected in her practices, right? She would be like getting flustered and like would be getting, you know, was so afraid of getting injured that then she was messing up a lot. So that kind of just helps informs how we're going to approach the sports aspect of it by knowing our characters and like what's going on in their heads and understanding how they're processing in real time what they're going through.
Right. Right. DCC is so, it's a great watch, but it's a hard one. I don't know if it's because I'm a girl, but like I
Yes, no,
just
I'm gonna agree
like
with
it's
you. Yeah.
heartbreaking. I mean, I feel I get really emotionally invested in the characters, like in their journeys and these dreams. And but what I did love was, I mean, season one not only made an impact, obviously, on the people watching it, but it actually made an impact in these women's lives. We find out that their compensation is very low and very much based on sort of the old school adage of like, you get exposure and you should be happy to be here. And we found out, I
And
think,
not
right
only that, but
before.
it's also like you want to be here,
Right, exactly.
And it's true. Like a lot of those women want to be there.
Yes. But it's like, think the fact that right before I think season 2 dropped, we find out that their salaries were like massively increased.
Hmm.
How does it feel to sort of be a part of something that was like, oh, this like made an absolute sort of tangible difference in these women's lives? I think they should be compensated even more. That must be a good feeling to feel like, oh, we were able to not only tell a story that was compelling and entertaining, but it also obviously showcased how much work this takes, how passionate these
Hmm.
women are, and made a significant change in the organization.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's something that I'm so proud of to have been a part of. And like, I feel like a lot of people that work in documentary, we're people that are very passionate about topics and like wanting to create change in our work. That's one of the reasons why documentary was also so appealing to me because ecology, I wanted to change the world and I wanted to make it better through, the sciences. But I felt like with documentary is one way that you can change the world by like informing people and letting them kind of like enact change in that way, right? So it was honestly like I remember when I found out that like they got the raise, I like just getting so emotional and so chilled because I had been with these ladies now for like 2 years and knowing like everything that like how hard they work and how deserving they are of better compensation and to document being part of the process of documenting like their fight and how um passionate they were about it and it it's honestly an honor. Like really, I feel like I am like we are so blessed and honored to have been like able to document and like put a spotlight on like how amazing these women are and also just like how hard they work. And then in season 2, just documenting how hard they work for what they deserved and being with them through that process was really, really fulfilling, honestly. But
Yeah.
I think like again, it was all them they did they did the hard work of like having to like have these conversations and talk to lawyers and economists and like figure out like how much are we worth and how much can we ask for and we were just like there to document it.
Yeah. It's really, really cool. And I hope and I'm certain it has inspired other women, other groups who are unfairly compensated to do the same thing. And I think it's, you know, ultimately part of the sports experience. It is the athletes. But you can't tell me that if you went and watched a football game with no band, with no
Right.
cheerleaders, with
Yeah.
no mascot, there's this whole, I guess, I don't know, spirit squad even doesn't seem like the right word, but there's this whole element of people who make the game watching experience
Yeah,
who
they
without it
enhance it.
absolutely, and who without it, it wouldn't be the same, and so, like, starting to challenge how those individuals and their talents are perceived and compensated, I think is really, really cool. How did you and the team sort of decide whose stories to focus on? Like,
Hmm.
because it's really more of an ensemble, like, obviously, we have some, like, main people that we follow, but how do you guys sort of make those decisions on what arcs you're going to follow and prioritize?
So let's start from like the beginning of the series, right? Like when I come in and post production, by the time I come in, all the training camp has already been shot. The team's already been made. So in some way, that decision kind of has been made before I come in by Greg and the rest of the team in the field, where they kind of just like see who they first kind of like find more intriguing or just like compelling or interesting that they want to find out more about and they kind of see where that goes. And say for example for season 2, we knew that pay was going to be part of the conversation. So that was like a theme that we already kind of like figure we were going to have to follow throughout the rest of the season. So then you have someone like Jada that's so like adamant about creating change and wanting to, make a difference. And then the rest of the group leaders like God, I'm blanking Armani and Shande, you kind of just like know that these are people that are going to be very important to the story from just like knowing that they kind of are like already digging into these themes, right? But once you start building like the rest of the scenes, it really comes down to like, say when we're like talking about kicks, then we know that Ariel is somebody that like would be good to have the spot. We would like to spotlight and through this process because she is someone that like really helps us understand how difficult it is and what are the challenges of the kicks better than somebody that's already really good at kicks.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of like, in a way, we start out with like our main characters that, as the season develops, we know, we start like having like interviews and OTFs with, and like that kind of helps us like learn more about them and who they are and how we want to like think about them and their story arcs. But every now and then, there's like little side characters that then we can also like based on like what we're showing in the scene.
Right. To
in the
sort
rest
of
of the season.
sort of fortify a certain element, like the kicks, or why X is
Exactly.
so important, or why it's so difficult. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Do you get, I mean, personally, I mean, I know you have such a personal investment, but do you, seeing some of these girls heartbroken when they don't make the team, like it is really tough. Do you get personally attached?
Oh my God, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really, especially like in the edit, the audience is getting attached watching the finished product, right? Like this is the edited show that we've condensed of like, so many days of shooting into like hour-long episodes. Imagine like just like how much more invested you become when you're watching all the behind the scenes.
Hundreds
You
of
see
hours.
them in
Yeah.
their very intimate settings. And it's so, the crew with Greg is very small. So that allows for them to be able to like really earn the trust of the teams and the trust of the different subjects in a way that, if they're in their apartment, it's not like a whole crew in their apartment. It's just like the cameraman, right? It's just the DP. So it's just you get to really see like these people like, and they kind of end up forgetting that they're even like there's a camera around them and that they're being filmed, and you just kind of really see like the rawness of like their everyday lives. So and they learn they really open up to you and they become so vulnerable, and you almost like when I approach these character stories, I feel like I need to think almost kind of like a therapist. And you really learn about these people and like how I don't know, you just kind of become very attached in that
Yeah.
way just because it's so raw.
Yeah. Was there someone that you felt like had sort of the best arc this season, like a journey that you're really attached to or really proud of?
Yeah. I would say two people. So with Jada, I was obsessed with Jada. She was so badass and I loved her attitude. I loved that she was like wanted to champion for their rights, but she also wanted to be like a very responsible and good person, like a great good group leader and a good example for like the rest of the team. I thought that she was just like such a fantastic leader and really caring. Like I feel like that's so important to being a good leader that you don't always see, and just like in all aspects of life, people that care. And she genuinely cared about her teammates and was also just like so, you know, she was so considerate of everyone's circumstances and very just like something about watching somebody like that on screen that felt very like calming and almost like at home. Like she just made you so comfortable. So I love just following her arc and like just kind of learning more about her and like learning why she's like that, right? Like it's her experience with her father and learning how to like she had this complicated relationship with him because he was out of her life, but she also had to learn to forgive him. And I think it really helped shape the way that she like viewed the world. And then the other character that I felt like I was very invested in was Shandi. When you then see what ends up happening with her through the rest of the season, it breaks your heart because I feel like you have a deeper understanding of what it's like to be in that position, right? So I was very invested in like her, like telling her story responsibly and like also with everything that she had been through being adopted and then the abuse from like her ex-partner. You kind of just really like learn how to like think about her through her lens and her perspective and like put yourself in her shoes, that you become invested in that way too.
Well, and again, you are part of, like, you see it obviously on your side, but you are also responsible for shaping how we perceive and see these humans and how we are able to, in the same way you did, relate and understand and feel like we are reflected through these characters or through their struggles. And that's such a cool thing to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do. I know it's a huge responsibility, but I know it's one that you take
Absolutely.
really seriously. And just, knowing that your career has brought you here to like some of what is considered the most premium content on TV is so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question before we wrap it up. I want to know, I know you don't watch a lot of docu,
Yeah.
and I know that since we know how the sausage is made, but I do want to know like what's something you've watched recently, TV, movie, scripted, unscripted, that you were just like chef's kiss as an editor, like through your lens. What is something that you've watched recently that you were like, oh, just so good?
So I am a huge horror fan. I love
Yes.
horror. Whenever I see something that's like getting like good reviews and like it seems to be like it's just going to be elevating the genre, I need to check it out.
Hmm.
So and I don't want to give any spoilers. Have you watched Weapons?
I knew you were going to say Weapons. I haven't seen it, but I know the plot. And
Mhm.
just heard sort of the story jumping, the various POVs was just a really interesting take on the genre. And I've heard nothing but good things about it. So,
Yes. So that was yeah, I absolutely love that movie. It was just also such a fun watch. One of the reasons why I don't watch a lot of documentaries is like when I'm finished watching, when I finish working, I need to be like totally immersed into something very different and
mhm,
distracted. And I feel like the easiest way for me to do that is with horror. Like I can't really do it so much with like other genres like dramas or
mhm.
comedy a little bit, but horror just like really like makes me like distracts me on like a different level.
Yeah. Allows you
So
to lose yourself, not think too hard.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like it was just like such a fun watch. And it really is like peeling an onion, like the way that they reveal things little by little. It's so satisfying.
Yeah.
So
That is
highly
exactly what I
recommend.
heard.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining. It was amazing to get your perspective on the industry. Again, one of those unsung heroes in reality,
Thank
in
you. Yeah.
unscripted, that is responsible for the content we enjoy, the characters we love. So thank you so much for coming on. It was incredible to talk to you and really looking
Yeah.
forward to what's up next for you.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you too.
Thanks. Thank you guys so much for listening to my chat with Stephanie. Editors are unsung heroes, not only in the unscripted industry, but in a lot of industries. They never get the shout out they deserve. Really cool to talk to her about her process. And I always love to hear about a big career pivot. I love to hear you went to school for this and you ended up here. I think so many people can relate to that story, including me. And if it's speaking to you, if you're on a path and you need a pivot, go for it. Happy Friday, guys. We will be back next week with more exciting guests. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at UnscriptedFilesPod. Feel free to send me a message. Feel free to send me an email. And I'll catch you guys next week. Don't forget, like, subscribe, rate, review, all the things. Thanks so much. Bye.